about doing what we can to cut down on our timings, but with the attorney's bills coming in, and it just showed that the 4 or 5 hour meetings were costing us beyond just the business we were trying to do. But that's the purpose, to give council this information. Any thoughts, suggestions, or you want to address it in item 5? Councilman Jones.
My question would be, are we charged so much due to the fact that they're not our city secretary? So, I mean, our city attorney, being that it's on, because in the past, ever since I've been a part of council, I never sat in a meeting shorter than 3 hours and 30 minutes. So I'm wondering, what is the difference now in which we don't have a city attorney than for the last, matter of fact, the meetings in which you have on here, 5 meetings in which we have not had a city attorney for it to now be a problem.
Because they're contracted, and so when we have a city attorney, him coming to meetings is included into his contract. And since we're using a contracted attorney, they're charging us hourly.
So, and these are, 4.5, 5 hour meetings. Like you said, the prior was closer to 3. So again, it flows with your concern in item 5. But Councilman Rowland.
I'll just say that I think council have already stated why the minutes have gone over. I don't know why this agenda item is on here like this. This is not for informational purposes. We all know that the city of Prairie doesn't have a city attorney. We have not met longer than our average time of our city council meetings. And so to put this on here, I don't know the rationale, and so hopefully you'll be able to give us some information on why you put this on here.
Sure. Well, when we get, my job is to keep council informed, okay? And council and certainly our residents have concerned about inordinate meetings. We actually have a item, discuss item 5, discuss, consider, and take action on a policy for agenda items to have a time limit in which each item is discussed that Councilman Jones proposed. So this is flowing right in with that. Now, it's here for information to show that, we could be here all night, but it is costing somebody. These are taxpayers' dollars, and we have a fiduciary duty to be aware of how we spend them. And my job is to make you aware of what was going on. Councilman Jones.
All right, so being that this is for information purposes, and I guess since money is being spent to taxpayers, and it's our job to do our diligence, when will, we've all known that we haven't had a city attorney, so when would that RFP go out, and what's been a holdup upon that RFP going out?
Well, council, we did the RFP, we did the advertisement, that's already been done. And I informed council, I believe it was at the last meeting, that we had those proposals. Council said that you were going to come in and review them. To my knowledge, no one has reviewed any of the 6 or 7 that we have. So how are we going to select the attorneys? The attorneys were thinking, and we had to call them and put them off till next Tuesday.
No one on council said.
The attorneys were supposed to come to the meeting.
Yes, they were. But if none of you have reviewed their qualifications, what are you going to do? Just have them talk to you?
Mr. Mayor, the process was, a month ago, you had on the agenda about these city attorneys. Council voted to open the pools for city attorneys back out for 2 weeks. We said at that meeting we would have packets available presented to us, which we have not received. So I don't know in what office where they are. So packets will be delivered to us. And so we can review, and they were scheduled to be on this agenda item when we voted a month ago. And so I thought that we were going to be going over city attorney packets at this meeting, as you said last week. And so hopefully next meeting, we will be discussing opening the RFPs and the packets for the city attorneys and having them present before us, but we still have not received the packets. And so if any company comes before us, they need to make enough copies for all the city council to have and get us a packet so we can review for all people who apply.
So we'll distribute. Now, how does council want to receive these? Because we've got a couple of addresses we don't
What
have. How do
typically
you want?
happens is they bring them, and they give them to us, and we review them, then we give them back. That way, their public information isn't being dispersed in other places. So they bring us packets, we review them, we have a conversation with them, and then we either decide if we're going to go forward or
The process that we've had the process is a firm would submit to the RFP, and the RFP has specific guidelines that we have in front of us, specific guidelines of the city attorney's services job openings that was posted. In this, it was sent where to be mailed, what to have to happen. We have, again, Mr. Mayor, you were the mayor when we just did this a year ago, so we would like it to be done the same way. We had packets, we all looked through the packets, we all had the companies come and do a presentation. The scoring, if we did any of those things, those were given back, but every council had an individual packet that we got to look through, not the day of the meeting, but prior to the meeting, so we can do our due diligence. And so we definitely want to just go through the same process you did before last year.
Okay, that's what we'll do. Okay, anything else on item 3? Okay, item 3, so now item 4 is fine. Item 4, discuss, consider, and take action on a policy for agenda items and a time limit in which each item is discussed. Councilman Jones.
I basically took what the ordinance in which we already had and added some additional items that were sampled from other cities, such as Section E and Section 1.518, manner of addressing the council time limit. Item E, whenever individual citizens or city employees appear before the city council to speak or to present testimony related to any item on the agenda, each council member shall limit the question or remarks for each speaker to an initial maximum period of 5 minutes, including time used by the speaker to answer the council member's question. A person answering the question should be permitted to complete the answer despite the expiration of the 5-minute limit. Also, in section 1.515 rules of debate, item G and H were added. Item G says, in all other deliberations by the city council, the same initial maximum period of 5 minutes per council member shall apply during the debate of any item on the agenda. A council member may question or remark as to each speaker or debate any agenda item for a second maximum period of 5 minutes, but only after other city council members desiring to be heard on the matter have exercised the initial opportunity for questions, remarks, or debate. Subsequent rounds may ensue in the same manner, each limit to 5 minutes per council members until a questioning, remarks, or debate has been completed. Item H, underneath the same section, says during hearing of the agenda item entitled matters presented by council members, each council member shall be limited to an initial period of up to 5 minutes after all council members wishing to speak have made remarks in the first round. Each member who desires additional time may speak for a second period of up to 5 minutes. Unused time from the first round should not carry over to the second round. This agenda item, in fact, ever since, like I stated, for the last agenda item, ever since I've been on city council, meetings have not ran efficiently. I say probably just about all the council members have sat and watched the city of Houston, which is the largest city and have more agenda items run through. There'll be approximately 2 hours on getting things moving and done effectively within 5 minutes of conversation and dialogue and debate, which allows you guys not to have to sit and hear us go in circles, basically saying the same exact thing or relaying a point. After 5 minutes, it exercises enough time for you to already know the decision in which you'll make upon the agenda item.
It looks fine. You want to make a motion and we submit this to city council for anything and back to the council to vote?
I mean,
Because this affects in ordinances or resolutions, so
We would have to bring this back.
Yeah.
But I have my unreadiness. My unreadiness would be that it's a great idea to limit the time, but such things that we discuss that benefits the citizens of this community sometimes cannot be debated in 5 minutes. The city of Houston, for the example you used, they have paid staff, they get paid, they meet regularly. You can't compare the 5-minute time limit. They have consent agendas that the city of Houston use for how we should govern our business. If we wanted to move the time from 5 to maybe 10 or maximum 15, but I think putting a time limit does, if we're going to put a time limit, I think we need more time. But I think that we do need some things to help streamline us to move forward.
I think the time limit just pertains to consecutive time talking. It doesn't limit your discussion. It's just saying you have 5 minutes at a time, and then it goes, each council person gets a chance to discuss for 5 minutes, and then if you have more that you need to discuss, you get another 5 minutes at a time.
So item E is different than item G and H. So G and H is exactly what Councilman Randall has just described. Councilmember Brian, item E of the first section is when someone is doing basically a report. So as we said through a 30-minute report last meeting, when someone does their report, they have to concise it and do it within 5 minutes, and then we go and we can ask questions upon whatever their dialogue.
So in the debate,
it allows you to have 2 times of 5 minutes. That's why it's the first round and the second round of discussion. I move.
Councilman Jones?
I move that. You said, well,
yeah, it has to be placed on the agenda.
I move that we discuss, consider, and take action on policy for agenda items to have a time limit in which each item is discussed to be moved the next meeting to be for action to be considered.
Second.
Okay, it's been properly moved and seconded that item 4, discuss, consider, and take action on the policy for agenda items that have a time limit in which each item is discussed, be shifted to next council meeting's agenda. You've heard the motion, ready for the discussion. Councilman. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed have the same right. Motion passed. Item 5, discuss, consider, and take action on mayor's emergency appointment approving an agreement with Trilogy Engineering Services for contract city engineer services.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Brown.
don't we already have an RFP out currently for a city engineer?
Yes.
So why would we hire an emergency engineer when we have come in and hire a
Well, because we have projects that, and we don't know how long that process is going to take. We don't know what engineers. And again, this is an emergency appointment. I'm just keeping council appraised of what I've done. The ability to do that is within my purview, but I'm keeping council informed that
So
we're in touch with an engineer. It's come up a couple of times, but
you say you've already made this appointment.
yes.
So how many days?
So what was the emergency?
Well, the emergency is we have projects coming to us that require engineers' decision and review.
Is that classified as an emergency because they're coming to us?
Well, my emergency is different than the emergency it takes to do a council meeting.
So,
If I'm filling an appointment, that's all I'm doing.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilman Rowland.
I appreciate you putting this on the agenda, because you have not done it before, so I definitely want to appreciate that. In our policy, section 9, article 9.2, talks about temporary emergency positions. And so since we're following our code of ordinances, do you have the recommendation? It says if an emergency arises in which an employee is immediately needed on a temporary basis, the mayor shall authorize the hiring of such employee on his or her own recommendation or the recommendation of the department head. Such employee can only be hired under emergency basis for one 30-day period. This is emergency. I think it's something we talked about the last meeting that we needed in an engineer. The question is, what recommendations or information that you have that qualifies as an emergency that you have to give to us? And then second, do you have anything from the company that you're recommending?
I do, but let me answer your first question. From in consulting the city attorney, an engineer is not the same as an employee. They're an independent contractor, and to pull one on does not hold to the same ordinances that you just read. They're not employees, and engineers and pulling. Council, you might be able to
Assuming
shed some light
that
on
you've
it
entered
since Mr. Hayes is not
into
here.
a short-term contract with this engineer for services, like you would hire someone on a contract basis. I don't know what the terms are, but I mean, that would be the basis, as opposed to putting them on the city payroll.
Yes,
Engaging.
but in reference to Article 9.200 employment regulations in our ordinance, when it gives the definitions of an employees, it's not just talking about full-time employees. Anyone who bears the name, like our city attorney, is our employee, but they're a contract employee. Our city engineer is a contract employee, and so it doesn't differentiate between consultant or employee. We're just talking about the process. Processes, the mayor has 30 days for this temporary appointment. The same in the ordinances I just referenced. My question is about the recommendations, about the company that he wants to hire, because he has that right. Do we have any information before us? And two, what are the recommendations on all the projects that you're saying that are in the pipeline?
The engineer has only reviewed one pending project that needed a second engineer's opinion. But again, in consulting the city attorney, an engineer is not an employee by the definition that you just read. And even in pulling engineers on board, you don't go through the same process that you do with some others. What would be good is if it be the wish of council, all you need to do is either table it, vote it down, and that, because that's where we are. I've heard from this council for probably the last 3 meetings, you wanted an engineer. Well, we posted out for an engineer, and in the interim, we have another engineer assisting the same as we would any other professional person.
This is my issue with this item. I have 2 issues. My first issue is I feel like this item came up in lieu of the agenda item that we requested to be on the agenda from last meeting about withholding COs until we hire a city engineer. So I feel like this was put on there in lieu of that. My second issue is that we just had item 3 put on the agenda where we discussed the overages of the cost from the city attorney because he's under a contract, and we're about to try to go into the same agreement with the city engineer. So whereas we will be under a contract with an engineer, our costs that we would be spending would have a ceiling, and whereas when he's in contract, we're going to be charged hourly. So we're going to be in the same boat where we're not being good stewards of the city's finances, because we have a process that's already in place And I feel like we could have because the purpose of putting the agenda item on the agenda for last meeting was to expedite the process to get the city an actual engineer. And I feel like we circumvented that instead of just pushing the process and getting an actual engineer in here. We're kind of kicking the can down the street so we can take care of all of these projects that are coming in, but
I will say that.
Here, let me respond, if you don't mind. Let me respond to Councilman Randall. Engineers, unlike city attorneys, do not bill us hourly. Typically, engineers are paid by the project for the project that we consult with them on. So this costing the city extra money is totally incorrect, number one. Number two, the project that the engineer is consulting on is not the project that you all had, as you say, last meeting, expressed concerns with Panther Hill. So, and let me say this. In my mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's no different than Ms. Dickey left, and I found Ms. Johnson to pull in for emergency 30 days. It didn't have time to make it onto the agenda because it just happened, and it was within our 72-hour required state posting. So, gentlemen and ladies, this is the process. If you want to change a policy, that's beyond me. But my job as mayor is to make the city run. We need a city secretary, so fortunately Ms. Johnson was someone who had applied to this previously. You complained about not having a city engineer, and we have one in here. You complained about us not having a city attorney. We've got the documents, they've been there for 4 months, and neither one of them bothered to come take a look at them. But put the motion on the floor and let it fly or die. You're welcome to do that. Councilman Jones.
There was a question asked about what projects are currently out, and another thing, if this is an emergency appointment, what classifies as an emergency underneath the mayor rather than the city? That's question number 2. And as well as, if this is an emergency appointment, and you say the engineer hasn't taken a look at Panther Hill, why not, when that's been an emergency upon the city?
Council, I think he wants you to address one part of my emergency powers.
Well, it's unusual to have that provision in a charter, and number one, it's usually or emergencies are defined in different ways. For example, the city of Houston, an emergency is what the mayor says it is. And then it's up to council to sustain or not sustain whether it's an emergency or not. That's how they operate. And they can put it on and enact it on a single reading ordinance. And that's how that process works. So that this is really a function of the way your charter operates and the powers you've granted the mayor. It's different from an emergency as opposed to a fire, hurricane, or something like that. Here, I think you're talking about, if you pardon me, sort of trying to figure out exactly what the engineer is doing. Is he's approving plans and specifications for projects? Or?
Our permit process that was in place prior to me becoming mayor a couple of years ago is that when someone submits to have something built, redone, expanded within the city, they fill out their permit application, pay their fee, which essentially pays for Bureau Veritas, and they submit 2 copies of drawings. One goes to Bureau Veritas, our certified inspectors of 60,000 employees in 140 countries, and one goes to a civil engineer. We don't have one. We got a few sets of plans that need reviewing, and my job is to get that done. So that's my emergency. And again, it's no different than me bringing on Ms. Johnson.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Rowland.
in reference to the city engineer, I think we had this conversation last meeting. I appreciate you bringing the engineering firm to the emergency hire because we've not had a city engineer for the last 2 months. So I'm glad it's finally become an emergency for you. I will say that hopefully that we had a city engineer who's reviewed plans and all the things you just discussed for the last 2 months. My unreadiness is that your ability to want to hire the firm now for 30 days is because you want to move the project you talked about on the cricket field, which needs the signatures, instead of saying, hey, we have 20 permits that need to be approved, and we do need, the city of Prairie does need a city engineer. And so my confusion is that your emergency powers is not to get a city engineer just for one project and not the other 19 projects that are in the pipeline. So we had a serious conversation where we, again, didn't want any more developments approved or COs issued unless we had a city engineer. Where are we at in that process? Because I think we still had a base, halfway done job description for a city engineer. And so you're wanting to move all these projects, and your role and function as the director and department head, as per Article 9.20 in employment, that's your responsibility as the director for that department. And so hopefully at our next city council meeting, you'll have the job description and RFP and the things needed for us to move forward with hiring a full-time, a permanent city engineer. But I do think that we should move forward with the temporary hire of the engineering firm. But we need to also put some recommendations, connected to that.
No problem, but let me make a correction so the public is real clear as well as council. The 19 permits or anything regarding permits, our engineers have nothing to do with permits. That's my job. They review the civil plans that come through. They have nothing to do with permits. Bureau Veritas has nothing to do with permits. Our permit process comes into the city. We check the zoning and things like that. They pay the required fee. Our engineers or inspectors have nothing to do with permits. I just want to make sure the record is clear. Councilman Jones.
I think that's why a couple of agenda items are not on that agenda because of that. But my last question was, if this is an emergency hire, the #1 emergency right now in our city is the development and going forward with Panther Hill on temporary OCs. What's the update? Building structure, all those kind of things that we have questions that we want to answer. So how isn't this temporary emergency not working upon that?
Because as City Attorney Hayes told you, and City Attorney Kerwin before that, Panther Hill is not a legal emergency, except maybe in your mind.
I didn't say it was an emergency to me. What I said was, and I'm glad that students are here to say that it is an emergency within my mind when they are living in these conditions in which you are not. I didn't say that it was an emergency to me. What I said was it is an emergency to the city, being that this has been on the news, being that students are moving out day by day, being that students are having to find ways to get nickels and dimes so they can get out their lease and living in these living conditions, in which your job is to make sure that the city goes forward, provide better housing and things of that such. So if we're hiring an emergency engineer, I think one thing that should be first up on the list of his things are to go see, because I do know, as we was all in the room, and I do assume that you're a man of your word, we stated that no more temporary OCs would be given out to temporary COs would be given out to Panther Hill unless we got certain information brought back to us. So with that being stated, that means that the engineer, the emergency engineer, would need to go see about the development process, so that way we can move forward and with students getting better housing once that housing is brought up to speed, and as well as going forward with more development there at Panther Hill. So.
Okay. Now, and good point. And what I'd like, again, for the record, if you could give me 1 or 2 room numbers of students who are living in the conditions you just stated, so we could follow up on it for the record.
Mr. Mayor.
Hold on, ask Councilman Jones a question.
For the record, you said in the same town hall meeting I did, where you had about 50 students complain, every week you have students that come in here to state their concerns about Panther Hill, and you say that it's an emergency for me. As we asked you, would you allow your kids to move into there? I think the answer was no.
No,
So
no,
then-
no, don't
so
speak
then-
for me. I did
You
not
say-
say that, and my son could move there.
You said no. But going forward, how would we, if we're gonna make an emergency hire, that means that something has to be of some sort of emergency, and being that this is emergency to the city, not just I or you. Something needs to be done so that COs could be given out for the development to go along.
What specifically would you or council like the engineer to take a look at Panther Hill? So that we can have it done. I mean, if you can't give me room numbers, give me what you want checked, so we can get it checked, get an engineer's report, and bring it back to you. But we can't just throw innuendos out about something's wrong,
I think
because
we
we got mold. You see that right there?
We've been
You see that there?
asking, we've been asking
We
for
got
this
mold in
report.
City Hall, Councilman.
Mr. Mayor.
We've been
In
saying the
several
same thing
places.
every week.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir. Councilman Rowland.
You asked for some, what can we do?
Yes, give me a specific so we can follow up on it.
Specifics was, we said that we were supposed to receive paperwork for all 20-something buildings from that Panther Hill that are now open, that Bureau Veritas inspected, that we were supposed to receive copies of that. Second, in our permit process, and I think this is probably where we're going wrong, in our permit process, the city engineer is supposed to sign that form before you issue a permit. They're not the only one, but they're one of the people who are supposed to sign that form. So the question is, who is signing the form in their absence? Someone who's licensed to do that. Hopefully, by bringing on this engineering firm, or whatever company that you're using your emergency appointment for, that they're going to take on our whole process, and not just one thing, so you can move forward your agenda. The goal is, we need, if there are 20 projects, I don't know how many, but if there are 20 projects that need to be, that the city engineer will be looking at those projects and making their approval or recommendations, and then the city engineer would go back on the 15 buildings that you've opened up, since we have a city engineer. David Leindecker, our city engineer, did not sign off on any of the projects for Panther Hill. And so hopefully, if we're going to bring on an emergency temporary hire, that the city engineer will address those issues along with the issues moving forward. But I do think we do need a city engineer.
What's council's pleasure on item number 5?
We don't have nothing in front of us.
Okay,
What
so
do
you want to
do?
pass on it and carry it over to the next meeting? That's fine. But just make a motion on something so we can move. I'll be glad to, I mean, we can email that stuff to you as soon as tomorrow, if not tonight, but you want to hold it over to the next agenda? Can we do that by consensus?
If we do move it over into next agenda, does that mean since he has it